40 Acres and Maybe a Mule, Chapter 11. Pascal helped trembling Miss Anderson to her feet. Miss Harris stood picking glass out of her skirt. In spite of the shooting, they seemed calm. Pascal wished he could tell them how thankful he was that they were there. Gratitude burned like fire in his heart. What brave women they were to come to the angry South to teach former slaves. He found out that no one had been killed, and that the town had a doctor willing to treat the wounded colored people. Since they weren't needed to help, the city family hurried away. In a low voice, Mr. Friedman said, "Confederate soldiers might come and shoot up your farm, Gideon. You still want it?" Pascal had wondered about that. "I'll farm my land," said Gideon. "If they shoot me dead, I'll have a place for my grave." Pascal moaned. What choice did they have? How could they make a living except on their family farm? He spotted a tan pebble that was almost round. Would it give them luck? Whispering, "Pick a pretty pebble." He tucked it in his pocket. "Want to play Shadow, Shadow on the Road?" asked Nellie. "How we play it?" "Look," she said. Their shadows were in front of them. Glancing up, Nellie said, "Keep watching." Called, "Shadow, Shadow, change." As Nellie called, her shadow moved from her back to her side. "The road just turned," Pascal said. He laughed. When they arrived at the cave, Gideon held the paper. "Here's our title to 40 acres between a lake and a creek." His voice was low, and he wet his lips. Suddenly, Pascal realized that tone of them, that none of them knew what their land was like. He stared downhill. What if they had to cut down a forest of trees? He stared at the ground. Next, in his mind, he saw a stinking swamp, bubbling gas through ooze, and set between a lake and a creek. How could they farm a swamp? Mr. Friedman cleared his throat. "Well, tomorrow morning, we men should go find Gideon City's 40 acres. Pascal and Nellie glanced at each other. "We all should go," said Pascal. Gladness nodded. "All the city family," said Nellie. Pascal smiled. Come fair weather or foul, he had family. The next morning, Gideon led them uphill. He had directions from the Freedmen's Bureau, and they were almost halfway there already, about 3 more miles to go. On the way, a smiling man and woman walked up. The woman carried an infant. The man held the toddler's hand. "Y'all seen Wilson Road?" the men asked. The city family said no, but Pascal looked at their map and title and pointed out the possible direction. Another younger man and his wife on a one-eyed mule asked, "Y'all heard of Elmwood Lane?" They had 3 children. "No," said Gideon. "We'd be looking for Ghost Tree Lane." "I sure hope you all find your farm," the woman called. A man with a white beard was walking with what seemed to be his red-headed son and a daughter-in-law. "We're looking for the Land Bureau," he said. Gideon pointed the way to River Stop. "Poor folks, white and black be getting land," said Gideon. Pascal nodded. How wonderful that poor people could farm on their own land. They passed several crossroads and 4 abandoned chicken scratch farms. With each step, Pascal's heart sank. The woodlands and meadows seemed to have more and more rocks and boulders. Would the land be so rocky nothing grow? "Gideon," he said, "maybe freedom be about more than land." Gideon was silent. "Never you mind," he said after a while. "I ain't crying over poor land." Nodding, Mr. Friedman said, "I seen a heap of fair farms on failed farmland." He cleared his throat. A wagon drew near. The children cheered. Pascal waved as the Bibbs drove past them. Mr. Bibb sat in the back of the wagon with Mark on his lap. Mrs. Bibb held the reins up front. Naomi and Judith, holding the baby, sat beside her. Pascal watched Judith wave the baby's blanket until the Bibbs turned a bend in the road and Pascal couldn't see them anymore. Mr. Friedman said, "I wonder what kind of farmland they give white people." Raising his eyebrows, he grunted. Gideon looked at the drawing, read the directions, and they walked another half mile. He pointed. "The creek starts here." A rocky creek flowed across the road. Planks showed that there had been a bridge, probably before the war, but the sandy creek was shallow. A recent wagon had rolled across without getting bogged down. Gideon took off his boots. Nellie and Gladness raised long skirts, and they all waded across. Gideon walked on, staring at his feet, afraid, it seemed, to look up. "The ghost tree," called Pascal. He couldn't miss it. A huge lone oak stood guard, back from the road. Rain had washed the soil from its roots until they looked like raised chicken feet. "Bear den," Mr. Friedman said, pointing to the cavern under the tree roots. "I bet bears sleep there all winter, and foxes raise young there in the spring." They walked farther, and Pascal turned to face the land. "Yeah, I can see a shining of the lake over yonder," he said. "This be it." He turned to see tears in his brother's face. Tears welled up in Pascal's eyes as well. Running to Gideon, Pascal buried his face in his brother's side, hugging him before turning around. This was the prettiest land Pascal had ever seen. Besides the ghost tree, there were maybe 30 other trees, mostly wind-dancing willows, scattered along the edges of the lake and the creek. Otherwise, grass and wildflowers blanketed the land. Meadowlarks flashed yellow feathers, singing as they flew across the flowers. Red-winged blackbirds called from 9 cattails in the creek. The land smelled clean and fertile and good. "We need to plow the grass under for planting crops," Gideon said softly, "but we got no mule and no plow." Mr. Friedman held up his hand. "If you plow, the first wind blows the good topsoil away. But Indians out west do differently. They set fire. We got a lake, we got a creek, we rent down the trees in outer area and burn the grass." "Burn the land," said Gideon. "Yes, sir," said Mr. Friedman. "Set fire and control it. Enough dry grass in there still that leaves fertile land all freed up for farming," Pascal said. "We got 5 hoes and some bags of seed for cotton. Besides that, we got seeds for potatoes, turnips, salads, beans, and squashes, even watermelon." Mr. Friedman waved towards the land. "After we burn away the grass, we dig holes, plant seeds, and cover them. That's all. No plow needed. But we'll need help. Plenty colored folks on the road we can ask for help, and I can make more hoes." "Sure is fine looking," said Gladness. Suddenly, she squealed and ran for the waist-high wildflowers. "Flowers!" she screamed. "Pink and yellow and blue and white," she turned. "Can we leave some of them?" Arms raised, she swirled her long skirt. Nellie, laughing, ran into the wildflowers after her. Mr. Friedman followed Gladness onto the land. "Where do you want your house, Gideon?" "House?" Gideon covered his face with a hand. "We ain't got no money for a house." "I'll plant a food garden right by the back door of the house," said Gladness, ignoring Gideon's words. "Them seeds for vegetables and watermelons, they be ours to grow, mine and Nellie's." The grass was elbow-high to Pascal. He waded over to the mighty oak. "I wonder why it be called Ghost Tree," he asked. Only low grass grew in the shade of the huge oak. Black branches jutted out from the tree trunk, like witches' arms and bony fingers. The tree had mighty limbs on all sides. Its trunk was so big it would take 3 men to reach their hands around it, and it was bent up to the east, then straight into the west. Looking up from under the tree, Pascal was filled with wonder. He thought about the tree in the plantation where the overseer whipped the slaves. Pascal had had to stretch his arms around that tree, and the man had switched his bare back with hickory sticks. Pascal gritted his teeth. How had he lived through that? "How about here for the house?" shouted Mr. Friedman. He stood on a little hilltop. "It overlooks the farm. I can see the lake, the road, the creek, and the clear back to the pines." Pascal limped up to where Mr. Friedman stood, arms outstretched. When Gideon reached there, tears flowed again. Gideon said, "It can't be the truth. I will not hold this farm to my heart and lose my heart in pain. He shook his head. Nellie in gladness ran up the rise. Taking the paper from his brother, Pascal read the directions slowly. These be your 40 acres, all right, he called. Walls of Jericho. Pascal slapped his brother's back. Believe it, he called, laughing and crying out at the same time. And we'll have a pretty little house on this land in no time, said Mr. Freeman, rubbing his hands and smiled. I got it all worked out in my head.